Hello, and welcome back to Shadow Storyteller. If you enjoy chilling bedtime tales based on real events, don't forget to subscribe, tap the like button, and leave a comment below to share your thoughts or suggest a story you'd like to hear next. Now dim your lights, wrap yourself in a warm blanket, and get ready to enter a story that still haunts a quiet English village to this day. Tonight's story is titled, The Babysitter Who Vanished on Halloween Night. It was October 31st, 1991, a cold and windy Halloween night in the sleepy village of Hollow Creek, located on the edge of Norfolk, England. With its cobbled lanes, moss-covered stone fences, and mist creeping in from the marshes nearby, Hollow Creek was the sort of place where secrets seemed to settle as easily as the autumn leaves. The kind of village where everyone knew everyone else, and nothing ever happened until that night. At 6:15 p.m., Claire Holloway, a 17-year-old sixth-form student with dreams of becoming a primary school teacher, arrived at the Maple family home on Wych Elm Lane. She had babysat for the Maples several times before. Mr. and Mrs. Maple trusted her completely to watch their two young children, Oliver, aged 5, and Maisie, just 3. Claire arrived dressed in a warm navy coat, her blonde hair tucked into a woolen beret. She carried with her a small paper bag of Halloween treats for the children, and a paperback novel she planned to read once they'd gone to bed. The Maples had tickets to a Halloween gala at the Hollow Creek Community Hall, just a 20-minute drive away, and wouldn't be home until close to midnight. They left at around 6:30 p.m., the last anyone would officially see Claire Holloway. By all accounts, the night began as expected. Children in costumes came and went, knocking on doors, receiving sweets, their laughter echoing through the narrow streets. Claire posted a short message to her friend via pager around 8:05 p.m. that simply said, "Quiet here. Kids in bed. Spooky fog outside, LOL." That message would become a chilling timestamp in the investigation. At 8:42 p.m., a neighbor, Mrs. Lillian Brooke, who lived directly across the road, claimed to have seen a figure at the Maple family's upstairs window. She assumed it was Claire checking on the children. But Mrs. Brooke also remembered something strange. The light in the hallway kept flickering, and at one point she saw what looked like two figures, one significantly taller, moving past the window. She brushed it off at the time. Maybe Claire had a boyfriend over, she thought, though that would have been highly out of character for the polite, soft-spoken girl. But by 11:50 p.m., when Mr. and Mrs. Maple returned home, the house was silent, too silent. They entered through the front door, which they noticed had been left slightly ajar. The hall light was off, and there was a strange chill in the house. Upstairs, the children were found asleep, unharmed in their beds. But Claire was nowhere to be found. Her coat still hung on the back of the chair. Her paperback lay open on the armrest, spine creased on page 73. The back door was unlocked, a detail Claire had always been careful about. There was no note, no sign of struggle, no broken glass. Just an unfinished cup of tea in the kitchen, and a faint scent of burned wax, like from a candle long blown out. Police were called just after midnight. A full search of the house turned up no clues. Her shoes remained by the door. Her bag was still in the living room. The only thing missing was Claire herself, and the Maples' old rotary phone that had sat on a hallway table, disconnected but still a family heirloom. The phone's cord had been cleanly cut, and the device gone. A door-to-door investigation was launched across Hollow Creek the next morning. Flyers were posted, rivers dragged, and neighboring towns questioned. But no trace of Claire was ever found. The children, when asked, said only that they had gone to sleep after brushing their teeth. They remembered Claire reading them a story. Nothing unusual, nothing frightening, except for little Maisie, who, when asked by her grandmother 2 days later what she dreamt of that night, whispered. Claire opened the door and let a man with a mask come in. He gave her a phone. Authorities dismissed the statement, given Maisie's young age. But Claire's parents were never the same after hearing it. By November 10th, national media had picked up the story. The case was dubbed the Hollow Creek Vanishing, and for years afterward, it was the subject of conspiracy theories, local ghost stories, and even a few amateur documentaries. But the real details, the strange flickering lights, the missing phone, the child's eerie dream, never made it beyond the police reports. Even today, over 3 decades later, Hollow Creek remains haunted by the memory of Claire Holloway. The house on which Elm Lane still stands. The Maple children, now grown, have never spoken publicly about that night. And every Halloween, without fail, someone leaves a single candle on the Maple's old stone fence, along with a note that simply reads, "You left the door open." And so, the mystery deepens. Let me know if you'd like me to continue the story. Would you like to hear what the police uncovered in the weeks that followed? Or perhaps, what happened 21 years later, when a stranger knocked on the door of Hollow Creek's old police station, holding something wrapped in an old moldy coat? Type it in the comments, and I'll see you in the next shadow. Ask ChatGPT. For weeks after the night Claire Holloway vanished, Hollow Creek was no longer the quiet village it had once been. Gone were the days of unlocked doors and borrowed sugar. Gone was the ease of sending children off to school without a second glance. The fields, the woods, even the hedgerows seemed to hold their breath, waiting for answers that never came. The police presence had been heavy at first. Officers from nearby Norwich came in droves, questioning residents, inspecting abandoned barns, and digging through old wells. The local pub, the Hare's Tail, was packed each night with murmurs and wide-eyed speculation. Claire's disappearance wasn't just a mystery. It had become a shadow over the entire community. 3 days after the event, Detective Inspector Malcolm Hargreaves, a seasoned officer from the Norfolk Serious Crime Unit, arrived to take over the case. He was a tall man in his 50s, sharp-featured, and known for having solved the so-called Beeston Moor murders 5 years prior. Locals called him the Hound, not because he barked, but because once he caught a scent, he never let go. Hargreaves began by retracing Claire's steps. He examined the Maple house from top to bottom. The back garden, which led to a line of tall fir trees, and beyond that a narrow, unused bridle path, was of particular interest. Beneath the fir trees, he found a small patch of disturbed earth. Not dug, not grave-like, but as if someone had been pacing back and forth, nervously for some time. No footprints, though. The rain had washed those away. The missing rotary phone still puzzled him. Why steal a disconnected phone? Why cut the cord so cleanly? It wasn't valuable, nor particularly portable. But someone had taken it, deliberately. In his notes, he circled the word, trophy. Meanwhile, Claire's parents, Roger and Elaine Holloway, barely spoke to anyone. Elaine stopped eating for days. Roger, once a quiet man, started shouting at reporters who came too close to their gate. Every night, he sat in Claire's room, reading the same book she had been reading, though no one knew what page he ever got to. Sometimes, neighbors said, he would sit there until sunrise, muttering to himself. Then came the first anonymous letter. It arrived at the Holloway home in a plain brown envelope. No return address. Postmarked from a sorting facility in Ipswich. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed, no signature. It read, "Don't look for her. She came willingly." Detective Hargreaves had it examined for fingerprints. None were found. The letter was made public 2 days later, which only poured petrol on the fire of gossip and speculation. Some began to suggest Claire had run away. Others were sure she had joined some kind of cult, or been lured by someone she knew. But none of it made sense. Claire had left behind everything: her money, her coat, her bag, even her shoes. 1 week later, a second letter arrived. This time, it was sent directly to the Hollow Creek police station. It read, "She opened the door at 8:37. He said thank you." No one knew what it meant. Not until Mrs. Brooke, the neighbor who lived opposite the Maples, remembered something she had forgotten. Something she didn't think was important at the time. At around 8:30 that night, she had heard footsteps outside. Not children's feet, heavier, adult. A few moments later, the street lamp outside her home flickered, then went dark for almost a full minute. When it came back on, she thought she saw a man in a long dark coat walking away from the Maple house. She never saw his face. She had dismissed it. Trick-or-treaters, perhaps, or a parent collecting their child. But now, with the second letter mentioning that exact time, she reported it. That clue reopened interest in the bridle path behind the Maples garden. On November 18th, nearly 3 weeks after the disappearance, search dogs were brought in. About 200 meters down the path, hidden under a thick blanket of fallen leaves and brambles, officers found a torn piece of fabric. Blue wool, the same color as Claire's coat. But Claire's coat had been left at the house, hadn't it? A forensic test confirmed. The torn wool belonged to a different coat. One made from the same material, but several sizes larger. And on it, they found a few strands of hair. Long, dark, dyed, male DNA. There had been someone else. 2 nights later, another note was found. This one wasn't mailed. It was tucked into the mailbox at the village church. Typed like the others. Ask the children. They remember more than they say. Maisie was interviewed again, this time by a child psychologist, under gentle questioning, and with crayon drawings used as prompts. Maisie said something new. She drew a picture of a man wearing a mask like a horse. Though when asked to explain, she said it looked more like wood than fur, and that it had holes for eyes, but no mouth. He stood in the hallway, she said, holding the old phone in his hands. And Claire? Claire had walked with him to the back door. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She was holding his hand, Maisie whispered. The psychologist wrote down everything, and though experts debated whether her words were memories or just dreams, Hargreaves couldn't shake the image. A week passed. Then, on December 3rd, something strange happened. A retired constable named William Tate, who had once served in Hollow Creek before moving to Cambridge, turned up at the old police station with a box. Inside the box, wrapped in what appeared to be an old woolen coat, was the missing rotary phone. The same one from the Maples hallway. It was wrapped in newspaper, the Eastern Chronicle, dated October 31st, 1991. Tate explained that he'd found it on the steps of his own home 3 days earlier. No note, no sound, no knock on the door. Just the box. The phone had been polished. The cord still cleanly cut. Police examined it, But again, no fingerprints. No prints on the box either. There was, however, a whisper of something else. Inside the mouthpiece of the phone was a small slip of paper, curled so tightly it could only be seen with tweezers. It read, "She asked the wrong question." Detective Hargreaves had no idea what that meant. Neither did anyone else. The public grew restless. The media moved on. Christmas came. Snow fell. Hollow Creek tried to return to normal. But inside the Maple house and inside the Holloway home, nothing was normal again. Oliver Maple, the older child, stopped speaking entirely for 2 years. Maisie began sleepwalking. And Elaine Holloway? She began walking every night down Wych Elm Lane, pausing outside the Maples' house and whispering Claire's name. Some say they still see her there. But that's not where the story ends. Because in the summer of 2012, more than 20 years later, a young couple bought a cottage near Hollow Creek. While renovating their garden, they dug up something strange beneath the roots of an old oak tree. A buried tin box, rusted almost completely through. Inside the box were 3 things: a lock of blonde hair tied with red thread, a photo of Claire Holloway, smiling, taken from her school ID, and a final typed note. It said, "The summer heat of 2012 had barely settled when Hollow Creek found itself on edge again. After 2 quiet decades, the village's name resurfaced in headlines across Norfolk and beyond. News had spread quickly. A tin box, unearthed from beneath an ancient oak tree in the backyard of a recently purchased cottage, had reawakened one of England's most baffling cold cases. Ethan and Rosalie Turner were a quiet couple in their early 30s, both Londoners looking to escape the noise of the city. They hadn't heard of Claire Holloway. They didn't know the story of the girl who vanished. To them, the cottage on Bramble Lane was simply a fixer-upper with a big garden and a view of the misty meadows. But one afternoon in June, while digging a spot to plant lavender, Ethan's shovel struck metal. It was a rusted tin box, no larger than a lunch pail. Inside, they found a photograph of a girl, smiling young, dressed in a school uniform, along with a lock of blonde hair bound in red thread, and a small slip of yellowed paper with a single sentence typed in black ink. "You weren't supposed to remember." The Turners, unnerved, took the box to the local police. Word reached former Detective Inspector Malcolm Hargreaves by that same evening. Though long retired, Hargreaves had never let go of the Holloway case. When he saw the photo, Claire's face staring back at him from 20 years ago, his hands trembled. The lock of hair was confirmed by forensics to belong to Claire. But the red thread used to bind it? That was peculiar. Textile analysis dated it to sometime in the early 1970s. What was something older than Claire doing wrapped around her hair? The paper, the message, the delivery. None of it made sense. The tin box had been buried under the roots of a tree estimated to be at least 35 years old, meaning the box had either been buried before the tree grew, or someone had returned recently, dug through the roots, and placed it there. Either possibility was disturbing. While forensics dug into the box, Ethan and Rosalie continued renovations on their new home. But almost immediately after the box was unearthed, strange things began to happen. At night, they heard tapping on the window panes, rhythmic, always at the same time. 12:18 a.m. When Ethan finally built up the courage to look outside during one of those moments, he saw no one. But in the condensation on the glass, he noticed a small handprint, child-sized. Another night, Rosalie awoke to the sound of the old rotary phone ringing. Except they didn't own one. Shaken, they searched the house again and, behind the old kitchen cabinets, found something wedged in the wall. A small, oval-shaped piece of wood with two round holes like eyes. It was part of a mask, worn, cracked, and strange. It seemed too small for an adult face, yet too defined for a toy. They turned the item over to police, who quickly traced it back to an obscure artist who had once lived in Hollow Creek, Harold Fenwick. Fenwick had died in 1992 in a house fire. He had been reclusive, eccentric, and obsessed with European ceremonial masks. He was also known to wander the village at night, dragging a battered suitcase behind him. His home had burned down just months after Claire disappeared. When police returned to the remnants of Fenwick's property, still fenced off, now overgrown, they discovered something that had somehow been missed in the original investigation. Beneath the charred floorboards of what was once his study, there was a narrow stone staircase leading to a small underground room. The air below was cold and still. Inside, they found remains of broken wooden frames, wax drippings, symbols carved into the walls, and one object that chilled the team to their core. A half-burned photograph of Claire Holloway, taken from the same school ID photo discovered in the tin box. Next to it, an open journal. Most of the pages were damaged by fire, but a few entries were legible. The door must be opened willingly. She is the right one. Curious. Obedient. She'll let him through. The phone is the key. Must not be interrupted again. Time is short. The implication was horrifying. Had Fenwick targeted Claire? Had he manipulated her into participating in something under the guise of art? Or something worse? Detective Hargreaves, haunted by the discovery, requested access to archived interviews from 1991, particularly those involving Claire's younger charges, Oliver and Maisie Maple. Maisie's drawings from the time had been preserved. One showed Claire standing at the front door, holding hands with a tall figure in a long coat. His face was obscured. The only other feature was a cord, like that of a phone, wrapped tightly around his wrist. In the background, in every single drawing, was a red door. Maisie had never seen a red door in the Maple house. It didn't exist in real life. Yet it appeared in her dreams, and now again in her adult recollection. She claimed it was where Claire went, and never came back. In 2013, after public pressure mounted following the discoveries, Hollow Creek police decided to reopen the Holloway file. More advanced forensics, new psychological profiling, and the growing pattern of symbolism pointed to one unsettling theory. Claire may not have been abducted in the conventional sense. She may have been lured into something deeper, stranger, and perhaps not entirely physical. But the case took a darker turn when Rosalie Turner began sleepwalking. Ethan would find her standing at the back door barefoot, mumbling in a voice that wasn't hers. She spoke in phrases that made no sense. Once she whispered, he thanked her for the line. It was clear now. Another night, she said. The red door's unlocked. He just needs one more. The final straw came when Rosalie was found unconscious near the oak tree, where they discovered the box, clutching the same piece of red thread that had been turned over to police months earlier. Except the thread had never been returned. Police had kept it locked in evidence storage, 100 kilometers away. So how had she gotten it? When shown the thread at the station, the original forensic officer confirmed. Same knots, same frayed end. Impossible to duplicate. Rosalie remembered nothing. At this point, Detective Hargreaves did something he had resisted for years. He visited the old maple house. Now abandoned, the property had fallen into disrepair. Weeds strangled the garden. The windows were boarded, but inside, much remained untouched. Toys still lay in the corner of the nursery. A cup of tea long evaporated had left a circular stain on the living room table. In the hallway, beneath peeling wallpaper, Hargreaves found a deep groove in the wooden floor. A trail, leading from the front door to the back. And at the base of the door, one final object wedged between the frame. A button, not from Claire's coat, but from a man's jacket. Worn wool, faint traces of ash, and carved onto its face, barely visible in the dim light, was the number 1287, the same number found on Claire's photo, the same number that had haunted Hargreaves for years. He left the house that evening with more questions than answers. Was this number a time, a date, a code, or was it a count? Was someone or something keeping track? Detective Inspector Graham Fletcher stared at the photograph in his hands. It was a slightly faded printout from the Taylor family's home printer, a candid picture taken just an hour before Lucy Henshaw vanished. She was smiling, seated on the living room couch, holding baby Max on her lap, with little Ellie grinning beside her in a pumpkin costume. The odd part wasn't Lucy herself. It was the faint outline in the background, a shadow that seemed out of place, standing just beyond the archway to the hallway, not shaped like any decoration or known family member. Fletcher had seen his fair share of optical illusions in images. Still, this one had his instincts twitching. Outside, the small village of Hartley-on-Moor was already chilled by early November fog. Posters of Lucy's face fluttered on lampposts. Her disappearance had made headlines across Yorkshire, but as days passed without a solid lead, whispers had started. About the house, about the date, about what really happened that Halloween night. Graham folded the photo and slipped it into a plastic sleeve. He turned to Constable Riley, who had just returned from canvassing neighbors again. "Nothing new," Riley said, removing his gloves. "Some kids swore they saw Lucy walking toward the church road around 9:30. But they were hopped up on sweets and ghost stories. Another old woman says she heard a scream, but she always hears screams on Halloween." Fletcher sighed. "The parents are still out of town? They flew back this morning. I've scheduled to speak with them again after lunch." "Good. Let's dig deeper into Lucy's past. Friends' old addresses, anything strange in her history." Riley raised an eyebrow. "You think she ran off?" "I don't know what I think," Fletcher muttered, "but something doesn't feel right." Across the village, in a small, windowless office beneath the local school's administrative wing, Mr. Gregory Plum, Hartley-on-Moor's librarian and part-time local historian, was poring through old microfiche files. Ever since he overheard 2-year 10 students whispering about the babysitter curse, his curiosity had gotten the better of him. He scrolled slowly through faded newsprint from 1983. There it was, a headline that chilled him. "Teenage babysitter disappears from Hartley estate. Police baffled." No photo, just a name. Ruth Carrington, age 17. Vanished without a trace on Halloween night. He flicked forward. Another entry. This time from 1969. Young girl vanishes during babysitting job. Last seen on All Hallows Eve. And again, in 1954. Village teen missing after Halloween babysitting stint. each spaced about 14 to 15 years apart. Each time, the babysitter never returned. Each time, the family who hired her had no idea what happened. Plum stood up abruptly, knocking his chair over. It had to be coincidence, didn't it? But the records, the pattern was too clean. Back in the Taylor home, Ellie was speaking to a counselor provided by the local authorities. She was only 5, her words still disjointed and colored by imagination. But she spoke of something odd. She said someone was at the window, Ellie whispered, gripping the stuffed black cat on her lap. Lucy told me to go upstairs. She said it was probably just a trick-or-treater. But she looked scared. And did you hear anything else? The counselor asked gently. A knocking. 3 knocks. And then, I heard Lucy talking to someone. But her voice didn't sound like Lucy. What do you mean? Ellie looked down. It was like she was saying words that weren't English. Like whispering spells. The counselor made a note, glanced toward the living room doorway where D.I. Fletcher was quietly listening. His brow furrowed. That night, Fletcher found himself unable to sleep. The rain had started, a gentle tapping against his apartment window. He opened the old case files, digitized copies of the past disappearances that Gregory Plum had emailed him after their brief conversation earlier that afternoon. The similarities were undeniable. Different families, different streets, always a babysitter, always Halloween. And then he noticed something even stranger. Each time, in the days leading up to the babysitter's vanishing, the children they were hired to watch reported a visitor at the window. A man in black, wearing an old-fashioned coat, silent, smiling. He closed the file slowly. Something ancient, or perhaps something patient. The following morning, Plum invited Fletcher to the Hartley Chapel archives. Buried deep within Brittle Parish records was a local folktale, likely long dismissed as superstition. They read it aloud together in the cold, dust-filled chamber. In the year of our Lord 1743, on the eve of All Hallows, a girl named Margaret Ellis, orphaned and betrothed to no man, vanished from the hearth of the Hartley Manor while watching the Lord's young children. Witnesses saw a man cloaked in soot, standing by the doorframe. None knew his name, but villagers hence spoke of the night watcher, who returns each 13th year to claim the childless, the faithless, or the lonely. Fletcher glanced sideways at Plum. Was Lucy an orphan? Her mother passed when she was young, Plum said quietly. Father remarried. She was estranged, mostly on her own. The detective's spine prickled. That night, Fletcher requested a thermal scan of the Taylor residence. His request was laughed off by higher-ups, but he pulled some strings and managed to get a tech-savvy friend to help. The house was empty, the family staying elsewhere. As they walked the creaking floors, Fletcher's contact set up infrared cameras and heat detectors. You're hoping to catch what exactly? His friend joked. A ghost with a warm coat? Just humor me. Around midnight, the sensor on the hallway camera beeped. A shape moved through the foyer. Humanoid. Cold signature. No heat. No heartbeat. Just motion. They replayed it 5 times. Each time, the figure stopped at the archway where Lucy had last been seen, then vanished. By the following week, public interest in Lucy Henshaw's disappearance had begun to fade. News channels moved on. Posters were taken down. But in Hartley-on-Moor, something lingered. Children whispered about a man seen walking the moors at dusk. A girl named Becca swore she saw Lucy's face in her mirror. And then there was the letter, mailed anonymously, arrived at the village council office. Inside, a single sentence, typed on an old typewriter. She is not gone. She is elsewhere. And beneath that, pressed into the parchment, the faint scent of autumn leaves and smoke.